Samantha Nash used to have seemingly endless supplies of energy. As well as working as a community midwife, the mother of two would run at least 9 miles a week, walk her dog daily and enjoy weekend hiking in the Peak District with her husband, John. That was until a year ago. These days Samantha, 42, often barely has the energy to make a cup of tea. As well as suffering crippling fatigue, her legs can feel so leaden she can hardly lift her feet from the floor. Her concentration can also be poor, and she's had to quit the job she loved and no longer feels safe to drive. Yet Samantha's problems were not caused by some terrible disease, but by an easily treatable yet frequently overlooked health problem: vitamin B12 deficiency. Vitamin B12 plays an important role in health. For example, it helps the brain and nervous system function, and is important for the formation of blood cells. It is also needed for the manufacture of myelin, the insulating material that surrounds certain nerve cells. A lack of vitamin B12 typically causes extreme fatigue, muscle weakness and problems with memory and concentration. It can also lead to temporary infertility in women, while a lack of it during pregnancy can result in fetal abnormalities. The nutrient is found in red meat, fish and dairy products, and most people can get enough from diet. However, up to 18% of the population are deficient in it, with 80% of these women, according to retired GP Dr. Joseph Chandy, president of the B12 Deficiency Support Group, a figure he bases on anecdotal evidence. Deficiency is linked to aging, and in the elderly, it may be linked to dementia, adds David Smith, professor emeritus of pharmacology at Oxford. Once levels fall below 500 picograms per milliliter, the normal range being 500 to 1000, the brain starts to deteriorate at twice the usual rate, making memory loss 6 times more likely. The good news is that diagnosed early, a deficiency can be easily treated with injections of the vitamin that cost just 60p per dose. Under NICE guidelines, these jabs should be given on alternate days for 2 weeks. Then typically a maintenance dose is given every 3 months for life. However, the jabs can be continued on alternate days if there are neurological symptoms. NICE says this should be until symptoms improve. The problem is that treatment can be delayed, because the symptoms caused by B12 deficiency are so diverse. Clinicians may overlook the problem, or confuse it with other conditions, including depression and even multiple sclerosis, says Professor Smith. And left untreated, a vitamin B12 deficiency can cause serious, and sometimes permanent neurological damage. Samantha had been experiencing pins and needles, numbness and tingling in her right hand for several months, before she finally went to see her GP in 2014. Sometimes the symptoms had been so bad, she'd wake up at night. That one morning she had no feeling in her right hand for 2 hours. It was absolutely terrifying. I thought it could be multiple sclerosis or something equally awful, she says. Her GP initially said she had carpal tunnel syndrome, a condition caused by compression of the nerves in the hand, but also decided to do some blood tests to rule out other causes such as thyroid problems. It was only by chance that the laboratory added a check of her vitamin B12 levels to the list of tests. Her levels were extremely low, 153 nanograms liter. Her GP immediately put her on a course of injections, 6 over a course of 2 weeks and then a further injection 3 months later. I was astonished to be told I had a dietary deficiency, says Samantha. Working in health, and being very keen on fitness, I've always had a good diet, so it didn't make any sense. In fact, diet is rarely a cause of a deficiency, explains Dr. Pramini Mahendra, a consultant hematologist at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. That's because the vitamin can be easily obtained from food sources. For instance, 3 ounces, 85 grams of canned tuna provides around 2.4 mcg. Since it is found in red meat and dairy products, it tends to be vegetarians and vegans who are prone to dietary deficiency, she explains. More common is for a deficiency to arise from an inability to absorb the vitamin correctly. Simply getting older increases this risk, because as we age, the stomach shrinks and produces less of the acid needed for B12 to be absorbed. It can also result from pernicious anemia, a condition where the immune system attacks cells in the stomach that produce a protein called intrinsic factor. The body needs this to help it absorb B12. Conditions such as Crohn's disease, inflammation of the lining of the digestive system, can also mean the body doesn't get enough vitamin B12. Early diagnosis and treatment is critical. Yet Professor Smith says that diagnosis can be delayed as blood tests are not a foolproof way to detect a deficiency. He points out that under NHS guidelines, B12 deficiency has to be identified by one of two possible blood tests, both of which are unreliable, he says. One of these tests looks for macrocytic enlarged blood cells. The other measures the total amount of B12 in the blood. But you can be B12 deficient and sail through these tests. The definition of deficiency in the UK is a reading below 200 pg/ml, but Professor Smith says harm to the brain can begin at anything below 500. He insists that GPs should not rely on one of these tests, but should look for symptoms that suggest B12 deficiency, such as pins and needles, and then see if these improve with B12 treatment. After finishing her course of injections in July 2015, Samantha's symptoms improved initially, but a month after the 2-week course finished, she began to experience problems with her legs. My left foot felt heavy when I was walking and I had to concentrate when going upstairs or a curb, she says. On one occasion I was out walking my dog when all of a sudden I was unable to pick my foot up and I felt like I was falling. I was also extremely apathetic and became easily overwhelmed. On one occasion I broke down in tears when I was in a meeting about commencing study towards a master's degree, which was very out of character for me. Her GP was not convinced her new symptoms were due to low B12 and referred Samantha to a neurologist. The specialist diagnosed chronic fatigue and repeatedly asked Samantha if she was depressed. I kept telling him I wasn't, it was just so frustrating. Meanwhile, my family were getting more and more worried about me as the old, energetic person just wasn't there anymore. I just knew it had to be my B12 again, nothing else could explain it. By December 2015, and still on 3 monthly maintenance doses of B12 injections, Samantha's mobility continued to decline and her concentration was terrible. On the rare occasion I would go into a shop, I couldn't remember what to buy. On a really bad day I couldn't remember how to make a cup of tea. I was also extremely breathless. I was shadow of my former self. I could barely get out of bed sometimes. Researching on the internet, Samantha discovered that for someone with so many neurological side effects, having B12 injections every other day could help. There is, however, no clinical data to support this approach, says Shankara Panisha, a consultant hematologist at Spire Parkway Hospital in Solihull and Heart of England NHS Foundation Trust. However, anecdotally, patients have told me how their neurological symptoms have improved after taking more than the recommended amounts of B12, he says. That is their choice, but they have had to source this for themselves. Professor Smith agrees. Patients who have neurological signs or symptoms, even on the maximum treatment schedule recommended by NICE, are, in my view, fully justified in taking higher B12 doses if this relieves their symptoms. Samantha convinced her GP to prescribe alternate day injections for 6 months, which brought about a small improvement. But by May 2016, the doctor felt the treatment had been going on for too long. Despairing of the situation, Samantha decided to go against standard medical advice, and now sources her own vitamin B12 injections, purchasing them from an online pharmacy in Germany. As well as the daily jabs, she takes 5 mg of folic acid, as this helps absorption of vitamin B12. This, she claims, has stopped her symptoms getting any worse. Yet she is left with the neurological damage she believes is down to her initial undiagnosed deficiency. As a result, some days she has no strength in her arms and legs, but without the injections, she says her situation would be far worse. I get tired and sometimes my speech gets a little confused. It broke my heart to give up my job, but there was just no way I could do it anymore, feeling like this. I firmly believe that if I'd received vitamin B12 on alternate days for longer than 2 weeks, until my symptoms were much improved, I would still be working in a job I love and enjoy the life I had. My world has shrunk because of my deficiency.